Have you ever faced a moment where every fiber of your being screams that you must act, even when logic tells you to walk away? This is the extraordinary true story of a mother dog who made an impossible choice, refusing to abandon her newborn puppies, even when death was literally crashing down around them, trapped beneath tons of concrete and twisted steel in a building marked for complete destruction. Miguel Rodriguez, a seasoned construction foreman with 23 years of experience, was preparing his crew for what should have been a routine controlled demolition when he heard something that would forever change his understanding of what it means to be truly heroic. What happened next defies every safety protocol ever written and proves that sometimes the most extraordinary acts of courage come from the most unexpected sources. Today, you're about to witness a rescue operation that required one man to make a split-second decision to halt a multi-million-dollar demolition project, risk his career, and enter a death trap of unstable concrete and steel, all because he heard the desperate cries of a family fighting for survival in the darkness below. Share in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a split-second decision to help an animal in need? Your story might inspire someone else to be a hero when the moment comes, because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen when others choose to look away. Hit that like button if you believe ordinary people can be heroes, subscribe to Eternal Bonds for more life-changing rescue stories that prove love conquers all, and share this with someone who needs to see the incredible power of compassion in action today. The crisp morning air of Tuesday, October 15th carried the scent of autumn leaves and diesel fuel as the sun cast long shadows across the construction site on Maple Street, where the old Henderson apartment complex stood like a wounded giant waiting for its final moments. Built in the 1960s, this four-story brick structure had weathered decades of harsh winters and scorching summers. But it was last spring's devastating floods that delivered the final blow to its structural integrity. The relentless floodwaters had undermined the building's foundation, creating dangerous cracks that spread like fractures through every wall and support beam, rendering the entire structure so unstable that city engineers condemned it completely. For weeks, the building had stood empty and silent, surrounded by yellow caution tape that fluttered like warning flags in every breeze, while city inspectors conducted methodical sweeps to ensure no human life remained inside before the scheduled demolition. The evacuation had been thorough, with officials going door to door to verify that every resident had been safely relocated beyond the danger zone. Miguel Rodriguez arrived at 6:30 that Tuesday morning, carrying his steaming thermos of coffee and the thick clipboard containing the final safety checklist that would clear the way for the controlled demolition scheduled to begin at 8 o'clock sharp. His experienced crew had already positioned the massive yellow machinery with military precision, preparing the explosive charges strategically placed at crucial structural points to ensure the building would collapse safely within its designated footprint. The entire neighborhood within a 3-block radius had been evacuated, with police barriers and emergency vehicles positioned to ensure no curious onlookers could wander into the danger zone. As Miguel walked the perimeter one final time, his experienced eyes scanning every detail, he felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with demolishing a structure of this magnitude in an urban area where one miscalculation could result in catastrophic damage or loss of life. The morning had been proceeding exactly according to schedule, with every safety protocol followed to the letter, when a sound pierced through the familiar rumble of diesel engines and coordinated shouting of his crew. At first, Miguel dismissed it as mechanical malfunction, perhaps metal grinding against metal or radio static, but as he paused near the building's eastern wall to check his watch, the sound came again, clearer this time and unmistakably organic in its desperate, mournful quality. It was the heart-wrenching howling of a dog, echoing from somewhere deep within the supposedly empty building, with a desperation that made Miguel's blood run cold. Their final comprehensive sweep just 3 days earlier might have missed something crucial, something now facing certain death in less than 90 minutes, when the carefully placed explosives would reduce everything to rubble. The sound came again, longer this time, and filled with such anguish that Miguel felt his chest tighten with recognition of a cry for help that couldn't be ignored, regardless of consequences for the complex demolition schedule that had taken months to coordinate. But this wasn't just the howling of one animal, Miguel realized with growing alarm as he pressed his ear closer to the broken windows, because mixed with the adult dog's desperate vocalizations were the high-pitched whimpering sounds of what could only be very young puppies, their tiny voices creating a heartbreaking chorus that spoke of a mother's refusal to abandon her babies, even facing imminent destruction. The implications hit Miguel like a physical blow as he understood that somewhere in that maze of unstable concrete and twisted steel, a family was trapped and fighting for survival, with a mother who had made the same impossible choice any parent would make, choosing to stay with her children even when staying meant certain death for all of them. Every instinct Miguel possessed as both a professional and a father told him he couldn't simply walk away and proceed with the demolition, knowing innocent lives would be lost. But he also understood that stopping the operation would trigger a cascade of consequences that could cost him his job, his reputation, and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in delays. What would you do in this situation? Tell us in the comments below, because sometimes we all need to hear from others who have faced impossible choices and found the courage to do what's right, even when the cost seems unbearable. The decision crystallized in Miguel's mind with the blazing clarity that comes only in life or death moments, cutting through every rational argument about safety protocols, insurance liability, and job security that his foreman Carlos continued to voice with increasing urgency behind him. 23 years I've been doing this work, Miguel announced to his crew, with a voice that carried the authority of absolute conviction, as he stripped off his outer safety jacket and grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the equipment truck. I've brought down buildings in 12 different states and overseen demolition of everything from abandoned warehouses to condemned hospitals. But in all those years, I have never once left a job site knowing that something alive was still inside, and I'm not about to start today. He could see the fear and confusion in Carlos's weathered face, the same mixture of concern and disbelief reflected in the faces of the 6 other crew members who had gathered to witness this unprecedented break from standard operating procedure. The building groaned ominously in the cool October wind, its compromised structure settling with sounds that reminded everyone present exactly why this particular structure had been condemned, why engineers had declared it too dangerous for human habitation, and why the only safe option was complete demolition. The rational part of his mind catalogued every possible danger, from falling debris to toxic dust, to the very real possibility that the building's remaining structure could give way completely at any moment. But as another round of desperate howling echoed from the depths of the condemned structure, accompanied now by the unmistakable sound of claws scratching frantically against concrete, Miguel felt his resolve strengthen rather than waver. "If that was your dog trapped in there," he said simply, looking each crew member directly in the eye, "or if it was your child, or anyone you cared about, you'd want someone to try, wouldn't you?" The plan, hastily formed in consultation with Carlos and the 2 most experienced crew members, was elegantly simple. Miguel would follow the sound while maintaining constant radio contact, with a backup rescue team ready to attempt extraction if communication was lost for more than 5 minutes. As Miguel approached the building's main entrance, where the heavy wooden door hung at a precarious angle on broken hinges, he could feel his heart pounding with the same intensity he remembered from his very first demolition job more than 2 decades earlier. The doorway opened into what had once been the building's elegant lobby, now transformed into a treacherous obstacle course of fallen ceiling tiles, chunks of water-stained plaster, twisted metal fixtures, and puddles of stagnant water that had seeped through the damaged roof during recent storms. Every step required careful consideration as Miguel tested each foothold before committing his full weight, his flashlight beam sweeping across the debris-strewn floor to identify the safest path forward, while the sound of trapped animals grew stronger and more heartbreaking with each step deeper into the building's dangerous interior. The air was thick with dust and the musty smell of water damage, while overhead, exposed electrical wires dangled like deadly snakes from the partially collapsed ceiling, forcing Miguel to duck and weave as he navigated through the maze of destruction. The flashlight beam revealed a path through the debris that led toward what had been the building's community room, a large space where residents had once gathered for meetings and social events, but where the sound of desperate animal voices now seemed to originate from beneath a massive concrete slab that had fallen at an angle, creating a small triangular space underneath, serving as a makeshift shelter. As Miguel approached this improvised cave, moving with careful deliberation of a man who understood that one false step could bring the entire remaining structure down on top of him. The animal sounds underwent a dramatic change from desperate howling to a low, warning growl that made his blood freeze, because he suddenly realized he was about to come face to face with a protective mother who would naturally see any approaching stranger as a potential threat to her vulnerable babies. The growl was deep and serious, carrying all the primal authority of a parent prepared to fight to the death to defend her offspring. And Miguel understood that his next few actions would determine whether this rescue attempt would succeed or end in tragedy for everyone involved. The beam of Miguel's flashlight revealed two bright amber eyes staring back at him from the narrow confines beneath the concrete slab. Eyes that held a complex mixture of fear, exhaustion, fierce determination, and something else that Miguel recognized instantly as the unmistakable look of a parent who had chosen death before abandonment. The dog was a medium-sized mixed breed with predominantly golden retriever heritage. Her beautiful golden brown coat, now matted with dust and debris, pressed protectively against the back wall of her concrete shelter, where Miguel could clearly see the movement of tiny bodies clustered against her belly in the instinctive nursing position of newborn puppies. "Easy, Mama," Miguel whispered, his voice barely audible above the continuous settling sounds of the unstable building around them. "I'm here to help you and your babies, but I need you to trust me just a little bit so we can figure out how to get all of you out of here safely." The mother dog's growl deepened in response to his words, her lips pulling back to reveal teeth she clearly intended to use if this stranger dared come any closer to her vulnerable puppies. And Miguel could see in her defensive posture and blazing eyes that she was prepared to fight with every ounce of strength to protect her babies from what she perceived as a threat. Miguel realized she was trapped not just by the physical barrier of collapsed concrete surrounding her makeshift den, but by her own powerful maternal instincts that wouldn't allow her to leave the safest spot she had found for her newborns, even though that perceived safety was nothing more than a deadly illusion in a building literally scheduled for complete destruction. Behind her protective form, Miguel could count at least 4 small shapes moving weakly in the shadows, their tiny voices adding their own heartbreaking notes to the chorus that had first alerted him to their desperate situation. The space was far too narrow and low for Miguel to crawl into, even if the mother dog had been willing to allow such an intrusion, and any attempt to move the massive concrete slab above them would require heavy machinery that could easily destabilize the entire remaining structure and crush the very animals he was risking everything to save. "I know you don't trust me yet," Miguel continued in the same soft, reassuring voice he had used with his own children when they were frightened, slowly lowering himself to his knees on the debris-strewn floor so he wouldn't appear as threatening to the terrified mother. "And I understand why you're scared, because you don't know who I am or what I want. But Mama, I need you to understand that this whole building is scheduled to come down in less than 2 hours. And if we don't get you and your beautiful babies out of here right now, none of us will get another chance to save your family." As if she could somehow understand the urgency and desperation in his voice, the mother dog's continuous growling stopped for a moment, her head tilting slightly to one side in the universal canine gesture of curiosity and consideration, as she seemed to weigh whether this human stranger might actually represent the help she had been calling for since the wolves first started falling around her family. Miguel reached slowly into his jacket pocket and withdrew half of the ham and cheese sandwich his wife Maria had lovingly packed for his lunch that morning, tearing off a small piece of ham and gently tossing it toward the opening of the concrete shelter, placing it far enough away that the mother dog wouldn't feel threatened, but close enough that she could reach it if she chose to trust him enough to accept this first tentative gesture of friendship. The piece of ham landed on the dusty concrete floor with a soft thud, and Miguel held his breath as he watched the dog's nostrils flare delicately, catching the scent of what was probably the first food offered to her in what might have been days of desperate hunger and thirst. Her beautiful amber eyes moved slowly from Miguel's face to the piece of ham and back again, the internal struggle clearly visible in her expression as her powerful maternal instincts warred with her own desperate physical needs, her body's demand for nutrition fighting against her deep-seated fear of this unknown human who had appeared in her dark world. "That's right, beautiful Mama," Miguel encouraged in a voice that carried all the gentleness he could muster, settling himself into a more comfortable position on the debris-strewn floor, and demonstrating through his relaxed posture that he had no intention of making any sudden or threatening movements. I've got plenty more where that came from, and fresh water too. But first, we need to figure out how to get you and those precious babies out of there safely. And that's going to require us to work together as a team. The mother dog stretched her neck forward with infinite caution, extending herself just far enough to sniff the offered ham without leaving her protective position over her nursing puppies. And Miguel felt his heart skip a beat as he watched her make the momentous decision to trust him enough to accept this first small offering of help. Miguel spoke quietly into his radio, describing the situation to Carlos and requesting that the crew bring specific tools to the building, including hydraulic jacks, steel support beams, and a portable concrete saw that might allow them to carefully create a larger escape route without bringing the entire structure down on top of them. Miguel, you need to know that the building inspector is on his way over here right now. Carlos's voice crackled through the radio with obvious tension. He's not happy about the delay, and he's bringing the fire chief and city engineer with him. They want to know how long you think this rescue operation is going to take, because every minute we delay costs the city money and puts the entire project schedule at risk. Fuck. Miguel looked at the mother dog, who was now watching him with slightly less suspicion, after accepting his offering of food, her tail giving the faintest hint of a wag that suggested she was beginning to understand that he might actually be trying to help her rather than harm her family. As long as it takes, Carlos, he replied with quiet determination, knowing this simple statement represented a point of no return that would change his life forever. However long it takes to save this family, that's how long we're going to be here. Because I'm not leaving this building until every one of these animals is safe, and that's final. Over the next hour and 15 minutes, Miguel worked with the infinite patience of a master craftsman and delicate precision of a surgeon, performing the most critical operation of his career, using small hand tools to carefully chip away at the concrete around the opening, while the mother dog watched his every movement with growing curiosity rather than the defensive fear she had shown initially. Carlos and two other experienced crew members had joined him inside the building, despite their obvious nervousness about structural instability, bringing hydraulic jacks, steel support beams, and concrete cutting tools that would allow them to safely enlarge the escape route without triggering catastrophic collapse that could kill them all. The work was painstakingly slow and methodical, requiring frequent pauses to assess the structural integrity of surrounding concrete and ensure that each modification they made didn't compromise the delicate balance keeping the entire section from crashing down. But Miguel found that the deliberate pace actually worked in their favor by allowing him to continue building the crucial trust relationship with the mother dog. Every few minutes, he would stop his careful chiseling work to offer her another piece of food, from the collective lunch supplies his crew had donated to the cause, or a cap full of fresh water from his thermos, gradually demonstrating through these consistent acts of kindness that he and his team represented help rather than threat, salvation rather than danger. "She's absolutely beautiful," whispered Juan, one of the crew members who had volunteered to help with the rescue operation despite obvious risks to their safety, as he watched the mother dog's tail give its first genuine wag when Miguel offered her a piece of turkey from Carlos's lunch bag. "Look at how she's watching everything we do, like she's starting to understand that we're trying to help her and her babies get out of this nightmare." The puppies had become noticeably more active as well, their tiny voices growing stronger and more confident as their mother's stress level decreased, and her trust in the human rescuers gradually increased. And Miguel could now clearly see that there were indeed 4 of them, probably no more than 2 or 3 weeks old based on their size, and the fact that their eyes were just beginning to open to see the world for the first time. The mother dog had begun to relax enough to lie on her side in a more comfortable nursing position, allowing her babies to feed, while keeping one watchful eye fixed on the humans who were working so carefully and patiently to create her pathway to freedom. And Miguel found himself amazed by the intelligence and intuition she displayed in recognizing that these strangers were working to help her family rather than harm them. As the opening gradually widened under their careful chiseling and steel support beams were positioned to safely hold the weight of the massive concrete slab above, Miguel realized with growing excitement that they were actually succeeding in creating a viable escape route. But he also understood that the hardest and most crucial part of the rescue operation was still ahead of them. At exactly 11:45 that morning, with the opening finally widened to nearly 3 feet across and securely reinforced with steel support beams that would prevent any catastrophic collapse, Miguel made the gentle invitation that would determine whether their entire rescue attempt had succeeded or failed in its ultimate purpose. "Come on, beautiful mama," he called softly, backing away from the enlarged opening and settling himself against the far wall of the room to give her as much space as possible, his voice carrying all the warmth and encouragement he could muster. "It's time for you and your precious babies to leave this dangerous place and come with us to find a real home where you'll be safe and loved forever." For several long, tension-filled minutes, nothing happened except the soft sounds of tiny puppies nursing, and their mother's quiet panting as she considered this momentous decision that would determine the fate of her entire family. And Miguel found himself holding his breath as he watched her weigh the risks of staying against the uncertainties of trusting these humans who had worked so patiently to earn her confidence. Then, with movements so slow and deliberate that Miguel felt his heart stop for fear of startling her at this crucial moment, the mother dog began to stand up carefully, stepping with infinite gentleness over her sleeping puppies to approach the enlarged opening for the first time since Miguel had discovered her family's desperate situation. Her black nose appeared first at the edge of the opening, sniffing cautiously at the wider space and testing the air for any signs of danger, followed by her beautiful golden head, as she surveyed the room full of humans who had worked so tirelessly and patiently to free her from her concrete prison. "That's it, beautiful girl," Miguel encouraged, his voice thick with emotion, as he watched her take her first tentative step out of the shelter that had been both her salvation and her prison for what might have been days. But instead of emerging completely from the shelter, as Miguel had hoped and expected, she suddenly turned around and disappeared back into the dark confines of her concrete den. And Miguel's heart sank as he wondered if they had somehow failed to earn her complete trust after all their careful work. The disappointment and concern lasted only a few seconds, however, before she reappeared at the opening, with something infinitely precious carried gently in her mouth. A tiny golden puppy, no bigger than Miguel's fist, held with the delicate precision that only a mother's jaws could provide, demonstrating the incredible gentleness that female dogs use when transporting their most vulnerable offspring. She placed the first puppy carefully on the concrete floor near Miguel's feet, looked directly into his eyes for a moment that seemed to last forever, then turned around and disappeared back into her shelter to retrieve the second member of her family from their hiding place in the shadows. One by one, with movements that spoke of complete trust and absolute faith in these humans who had proven their good intentions through hours of patient work, she carried each of her 4 puppies to safety, placing them in a small, tight cluster near Miguel, where she could keep constant watch over them, while still maintaining visual contact with the humans who had become her unlikely allies in this desperate struggle for survival. The transformation was immediate and unmistakable as the mother dog stood in the open room, her posture changing from the defensive crouch she had maintained in her concrete shelter to the alert, confident stance of a dog who suddenly realized that the nightmare was over and safety had finally arrived. The difference was like watching a flower bloom in fast-forward photography, as the stress lines around her beautiful amber eyes softened and relaxed, and her tail, which had been tucked protectively beneath her body throughout the long ordeal, rose to its natural position and began to wag with increasing enthusiasm and joy. Miguel slowly extended his hand toward her, palm up in the universal gesture of peaceful intention, allowing her to approach at her own pace and make her own decision about physical contact. And when she pressed her dusty, debris-covered muzzle into his palm with a trust that seemed to defy everything she had just endured, he felt his heart expand in a way he had never experienced before in his life. "Look at her," Carlos whispered in amazement, his voice filled with the same sense of wonder and emotional intensity that was washing over Miguel like a warm wave. "It's like she knows she's been saved, like she understands that the danger is over, and she can finally relax and just be a mother instead of a guardian fighting for survival." The 4 puppies, sensing their mother's dramatic change in mood and stress level, had begun to squirm and vocalize more actively, their tiny tails wagging in perfect imitation of their mother's newfound joy and confidence. creating a scene of such pure happiness and relief that every man in the room felt tears threatening to spill from their eyes. As Miguel carefully gathered the small family for transport to safety, taking infinite care to ensure that none of the babies were separated from their mother even for a moment, he could see that beneath the layers of dust, debris, and the grime of survival, the mother dog possessed a beautiful golden coat with distinctive white markings on her chest and paws, and her intelligent amber eyes now sparkled with gratitude and hope, rather than the fear and desperation that had characterized her expression when he first discovered her. Outside the building, the assembled crowd of construction workers, city officials, emergency responders, and curious neighbors who had gathered to witness what they had expected to be a routine demolition erupted in spontaneous applause and cheers as Miguel emerged from the dangerous structure with his precious cargo. But the real magic and emotion of the moment happened when he gently set the puppies down on a clean blanket that Carlos had thoughtfully spread in the back of their crew truck. The mother dog immediately began the thorough inspection and grooming routine that dogs instinctively use to comfort themselves and their offspring after experiencing stress or trauma, methodically licking each puppy from head to tail while making soft, contented sounds that were the complete opposite of the desperate, heartbreaking howling that had first alerted Miguel to their plight. The veterinary examination that followed revealed the true extent of the miracle they had all witnessed, as Dr. Sarah Martinez conducted a thorough assessment of both the mother dog and her 4 puppies, her experienced hands gently checking for injuries, signs of illness, or any indication that their ordeal had caused lasting damage to their health or development. She's probably been without regular food and water for at least 3 or 4 days, Dr. Martinez explained to Miguel as she checked the mother dog's temperature, heart rate, and respiratory function with the methodical precision of a medical professional who had seen countless cases of animal trauma and neglect. But her incredible maternal instincts have kept those puppies alive and healthy throughout this entire nightmare. She literally sacrificed her own comfort, her own nutrition, her own safety to make sure they had everything they needed to survive and thrive. As Miguel watched the mother dog submit patiently to the veterinary examination, occasionally glancing over to check on her puppies, but no longer showing the desperate anxiety and protective aggression that had characterized her behavior in the building, he realized that somewhere during the long, tense hours of the rescue process, a decision had formed in his mind and heart, without his conscious awareness or deliberate planning. "Dr. Martinez," he said quietly, gently stroking the mother dog's head as she leaned against his leg with the trust and affection of a dog who had already begun to bond with her rescuer. "What would it take for someone to properly care for a family like this? What kind of commitment would be involved in making sure they have everything they need to live happy, healthy lives?" The veterinarian smiled with the knowing expression of someone who had heard this particular tone of voice countless times before from people who had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with an animal in need of a home and family. Well, the mother will need high-quality nutrition to support nursing 4 growing puppies, regular veterinary checkups to monitor her recovery from this trauma, vaccinations when the puppies are old enough, and eventually spaying and neutering for the entire family to prevent future unwanted litters, she replied with the thoroughness of a professional who understood the full scope of responsible pet ownership. But mostly, they'll need exactly what any family needs to thrive: unconditional love, security, consistency, and the absolute knowledge that they'll never have to face danger or uncertainty alone again. Miguel nodded thoughtfully, his decision crystallizing with each word as he looked down at the mother dog, who seemed to sense that something important was happening, and was watching his face with the same intense attention and intelligence she had shown when deciding whether to trust him in the building. 8 weeks later, on a crisp December morning, with fresh snow covering the ground, like a blanket of hope and new beginnings, the dog who had once been a nameless, desperate mother, trapped under concrete debris and facing certain death, had been transformed into Crystal, a beloved family pet who ruled Miguel Rodriguez's household with the quiet confidence and dignity of a dog who knew beyond any shadow of doubt that she was home forever. The 4 puppies, now fluffy, energetic bundles of joy and mischief who had grown from helpless newborns into playful young dogs with distinct personalities, had been given names that reflected the miracle of their survival: Esperanza, which means hope in Spanish, for the largest puppy who had been the first to emerge from the shelter. Milagro, meaning miracle, for the smallest puppy who had required extra care and attention during his early weeks. Valiente, meaning brave, for the puppy who had shown the most adventurous spirit as they grew and explored their new world. And Amor, meaning love, for the puppy who seemed to embody the pure affection and trust that had made their rescue possible. Miguel's grandchildren, who visited every weekend, had taken an active role in naming the puppies and helping with their care, and the Rodriguez family's backyard had been completely transformed into a canine paradise, with a large fenced area for safe play, comfortable insulated doghouses for shelter, and an endless supply of toys scattered across the grass where the puppies spent their days playing and exploring under Crystal's watchful eye. Every evening when Miguel returned from work, he would find Crystal waiting for him by the back door, her tail wagging with the same enthusiasm and pure joy she had shown on the day he first earned her trust in that collapsed building. And he would spend at least an hour throwing tennis balls and watching with endless delight as the four puppies tumbled over each other in their eager attempts to join the games. The local newspaper had run a comprehensive feature story about the rescue, complete with professional photographs of the demolition delay and detailed interviews with Miguel about his decision to risk everything for a family of dogs he had never seen before. But Miguel always insisted with characteristic humility that he was not the hero of this remarkable story. Crystal was the real hero. He would tell anyone who asked about that extraordinary Tuesday morning that had changed all their lives forever. She never gave up on her babies, never stopped believing that help would eventually come, never stopped fighting to keep them safe even when the situation seemed completely hopeless. She showed more courage, more determination, more pure love than I've ever seen from any human being, and all I did was show up at the right moment when she needed someone to listen to her cries for help. Tell us in the comments below about a moment when you witnessed incredible courage from an animal or person in your own life. Crystal's story shows that heroism comes in many forms, and we want to hear about the brave souls who have touched your heart. Share your story and inspire others in our community of animal lovers who believe every life matters. Like this video if this incredible rescue story touched your heart and restored your faith in the power of human compassion. Subscribe to Eternal Bonds for more amazing stories of hope, courage, and the unbreakable connections between humans and animals. And share this with someone who believes in second chances and the possibility that ordinary people can become heroes when they choose to listen to their hearts instead of their fears. The bond between Crystal and Miguel proves beyond any doubt that sometimes the most meaningful and life-changing relationships begin in the most unexpected and challenging circumstances, and that true courage comes in many different forms. From the mother who refuses to abandon her children, even in the face of certain death, to the human who refuses to abandon hope, even when the odds seem impossible. You won't believe what happens in our next rescue story, so make sure to stay tuned to see another incredible moment that proves love can overcome any obstacle, that determination can move mountains, and that miracles happen every day when good people decide to act with courage and compassion. Until next time, remember that every life matters, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Every act of kindness creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can see or imagine. And sometimes the most extraordinary heroes walk on four legs and communicate with nothing more than trust, gratitude, and the pure, unconditional love that only animals can provide.